The frostbitten winds of late November howled around the spires of Hogwarts, carrying with them a chill that seemed to whisper secrets through the cracks of the ancient castle. Hermione Granger sat alone in the library, her usual companions nowhere to be found. Harry was in detention for hexing Malfoy after yet another spat, and Ron had taken to sulking after an argument about Victor Crumb she had no energy to rehash. The familiar comfort of books didn't soothe her tonight. Instead, she felt an unplaceable unease creeping beneath her skin. The door creaked, drawing her attention. A figure stepped through the threshold, tall, pale, and cloaked in his usual arrogance. Draco Malfoy. She tensed immediately, her fingers gripping the edges of her parchment. This was the last person she wanted to see, especially alone, in the quiet sanctity of the library. Malfoy paused upon seeing her, his gray eyes narrowing. "Of course it's you," he muttered, making his way past the shelves, clearly intending to ignore her. "You don't own the library, Malfoy," she said coldly, more out of habit than true anger. He glanced at her, smirking. "No, but it seems like you think you do. Granger, alone? Where are your lapdogs?" Hermione bit her tongue. She wasn't in the mood for a duel of insults tonight. But something about his tone, it wasn't laced with the usual venom. It was tired, almost hollow. She returned to her book, but kept half an eye on him. He sat 2 tables away, pulling out a large, dust-covered tome she didn't expect him to even know existed. Dark curses and their counterspells. She stared. "Why are you reading that?" Draco looked up slowly. "None of your business. That book is in the restricted section." "I have permission," he said simply. "From who? Professor Snape?" Draco's lips twitched, not quite a smile. "Let's just say, I have access. Unlike some." She didn't respond. The room fell into a tense silence, broken only by the scratch of quills and the turning of pages. 10 minutes passed. Then 20. She stole another glance at him. He hadn't mocked her again. Hadn't said anything cruel or cutting. Just quietly read. Hermione found her curiosity outweighing her caution. "Why are you studying dark counterspells?" He didn't look up. "Does it matter?" "Yes," she said, her voice softening. "Because you're not the sort who usually studies anything seriously, let alone this." Draco finally met her eyes, and for the first time in 7 years, she saw something unfamiliar in his expression: vulnerability. "Things are changing, Granger." Hermione frowned. "What do you mean?" He closed the book slowly, pushing it aside. "You think you know everything, but you don't know what it's like, when your choices aren't really choices." She looked at him carefully. "You mean your father?" He didn't confirm, but the way his jaw clenched gave her the answer. "I didn't choose this path," he said, his voice low. "But I have to walk it anyway." Hermione felt a strange tightening in her chest. She wasn't sure why she believed him, but she did. For the first time, Draco Malfoy didn't feel like a sneering adversary. He felt like a boy on the edge of something terrible. "You don't have to," she whispered. He looked away, scoffing. "You don't know what they'll do to me if I don't." Silence returned, thick with unspoken things. Eventually, Hermione stood, gathering her things. "Be careful, Malfoy," she said, her voice quieter than usual. "With what you read. And who sees you reading it." He didn't respond. She turned to leave. "Granger." She paused. He looked at her then, really looked. "You're the last person I thought would talk to me like that." She gave him a sad smile. "You're the last person I thought I'd feel sorry for." As she left the library, Hermione felt a shiver trail down her spine that had nothing to do with the cold. Something had shifted. A crack in the years of animosity. A glimpse of something that shouldn't be there. That night, she couldn't sleep. Her thoughts were tangled with gray eyes and whispered warnings. She wanted to forget it. To pretend that brief, fragile moment in the library had meant nothing. But it did. And it would be the first of many. Because darkness wasn't always loud and thunderous. Sometimes it began quietly, in the hush of a forbidden book, in the space between rivals, in a choice unspoken. And as the days grew colder, so would the path she had unknowingly stepped onto. Hermione avoided the library for 3 days. She told herself it was because of homework, because of Quidditch practice schedules making it too noisy, because she needed a break. But deep down, she knew the truth. It was because of him. Because every time she closed her eyes, she saw the vulnerability in Draco's voice and the weight behind his words. and she didn't want to admit that she cared. It wasn't logical. It wasn't safe. And yet, it had planted itself in her chest like a weed breaking through stone. On the fourth night, she found herself slipping down the spiral staircase again, the corridors hushed in the late hour. Her fingers curled around the handle of the library door, and she paused, half hoping, half dreading he would be there again. He wasn't. Relief or disappointment? She wasn't sure. She wandered through the shelves, not even pretending to look for a book, until she found herself back at the same table. The one he had used. She reached out and touched the edge of the wood, as if some part of his presence still lingered. Looking for something, Granger? She jumped. Draco's voice came from the shadowed corner beyond the rows of books. He stepped out slowly, arms crossed, eyes unreadable. I wasn't, she began, but stopped. Lying would be pointless. I thought you were done avoiding me, he said flatly. I wasn't avoiding you, she said, chin lifting. I was thinking. Thinking, he echoed. Dangerous habit. There was no bite in his words. Just exhaustion. He moved closer, the flickering candlelight catching in the angles of his face. He looked thinner than usual, dark shadows under his eyes. Hermione realized, with a quiet horror, that he hadn't just been studying dark magic. He was being consumed by it. Why are you doing this? She asked. Why now? Draco looked at her, and for a long moment he didn't answer. Then, because if I don't learn how to fight the darkness, it'll destroy me. And everyone around me. She took a cautious step toward him. You're not alone, Malfoy. You don't have to. Don't, he interrupted sharply. Don't pretend you'd risk everything for me. You wouldn't. No one would. Hermione felt a flare of anger rise up, not at him, but for him. That's not true, she said. You don't know me. He looked at her as if searching for a lie, but found none. No, he said finally. Maybe I don't. Another silence stretched between them, thicker this time, but not empty. It pulsed with tension, a quiet energy neither of them understood. Draco turned away, but not before she saw it, a faint tremble in his hands. They've started asking more of me, he whispered. Tasks. Promises. My mother's worried, but she won't say it. My father just expects obedience. And the worst part, I thought I was ready. I thought I wanted it. And now, she asked gently. Now I'm terrified. Hermione's heart cracked. Without thinking, she reached out and placed her hand over his. He didn't pull away. They stood like that for a long moment, just two souls at war with the choices they never truly made. When the bell tower struck midnight, Hermione pulled her hand back. You should go, she said softly. If anyone sees us. He nodded but didn't move right away. Granger, why are you doing this? Helping me. She hesitated, then answered truthfully. Because I think somewhere in you there's still a chance. And I won't stand by and let it be wasted. His eyes met hers, and for once he looked more boy than Malfoy. Just a 17-year-old trying to survive a storm far too big for him. Good night, he said, voice quiet. Good night. Hermione walked away, not daring to look back. Her heart thudded like a drum, louder than before. The days that followed blurred together. They didn't speak in public, didn't even glance at each other during classes. But at night, the library became their world, where truths were traded in whispers and secrets hid between pages. He brought her parchment covered in spells he wasn't supposed to know. She brought books with countercharms and protective enchantments. They worked side by side, speaking in low tones, sometimes saying nothing at all. And slowly, something shifted again. She began to laugh, quietly, at the rare moments when he let his walls down. He learned to ask her questions instead of always answering with scorn. She saw the way his eyes softened when he listened. He noticed how her hands shook when she read about the unforgivable curses. One night, while tracing over the lines of a rune-heavy passage, their fingers touched. Neither of them pulled away. But the shadow outside the window grew darker. Because war was coming. And while they were building something fragile in the quiet corners of the library, the world beyond was tearing itself apart. Draco had secrets he still hadn't told her. Hermione had suspicions she couldn't voice. And every step they took closer to each other brought them closer to something inevitable. Something dangerous. Something that would either save them or ruin them both. December arrived with a biting cold that settled deep into the bones of the castle. Snow drifted lazily across the grounds, cloaking Hogwarts in white, but the beauty of the season did little to distract Hermione from the gnawing worry that grew with every passing day. She hadn't seen Draco in nearly a week, not even in their usual late-night library meetings. He'd vanished from their secret routine without a word. She told herself not to care. But she did. On the 6th night of his absence, Hermione cracked. She left Gryffindor Tower after curfew, moving through the dark corridors with her wand drawn, whispering lumos to light her path. She avoided Filch and Mrs. Norris with practiced ease, heading straight for the one place where everything had started to change. The library was empty. Cold. The candle sconces were dimmer than usual, casting long shadows across the rows of shelves. She walked straight to their table, half expecting it to be abandoned. But there he was. Draco sat slumped forward, head resting on his arms, face hidden. Books were scattered across the table, some open to pages written in languages Hermione didn't recognize. A nearly burnt-out candle flickered beside him. "Draco," she said, using his first name before she could think better of it. He flinched at her voice, then slowly looked up. Hermione gasped. His left cheekbone was bruised, a deep purple swelling beneath his eye. His bottom lip was split. There were scrapes along his jaw, and dried blood stained his collar. She rushed to him. "What happened?" Draco didn't answer. He looked hollowed out, as if something had been carved from him. She reached out instinctively, brushing her fingers over his wrist. "Tell me," she whispered. His voice was rough. "Initiation." Hermione froze. He laughed bitterly. "They call it that. A test of loyalty. Pain makes it easier to control people, you see. They say if you bleed for them, you'll fight for them." Her stomach twisted. "Who did this?" "I can't say." He shook his head. "It doesn't matter. This is my life now." "No, it's not," she snapped. "You don't belong to them." Draco's eyes met hers, hard and unreadable. "Don't I? I carry their mark now." She froze. "What?" He rolled up the sleeve of his black robe, revealing pale skin. And there, etched in darkness like a wound that would never heal, was the dark mark. Faint but unmistakable. Hermione took a step back, her breath catching. "I didn't want this," he said quickly. "I didn't. They made me. My mother begged them to spare me, but they wouldn't. And my father, he watched. He watched while they burned it into me." Her hand flew to her mouth. "Oh, Draco." He stood suddenly, pacing like a caged animal. "They gave me a task, Granger. One I can't escape. I'm supposed to," he broke off, fists clenched. "I can't do it. But if I don't, they'll kill her. My mother." Hermione's heart ached. "Then let me help." "You can't help. No one can." "I can," she said fiercely. "We'll go to Dumbledore. Or McGonagall. There has to be something." "You don't understand," he cut her off. "Dumbledore already knows. He's been watching me. Waiting. But he won't stop it. He's letting it happen. Maybe he thinks it's some kind of test for me. A final choice." Hermione stared. "You're saying he's not intervening?" Draco's silence was the answer. The world tilted. And then Draco collapsed back into his chair, rubbing his face with shaking hands. "I don't know why I'm telling you all this. Maybe I've finally gone mad." Hermione sat beside him. "No, you're not mad. You're scared. And you needed someone to see the truth." He looked at her then, really looked at her. "You don't hate me." "No," she whispered. "Even after everything I've done?" Hermione hesitated. "You hurt me. You said terrible things. But this is different. This is something else." He exhaled slowly, like he'd been holding his breath for weeks. "I don't want to be a monster," he said. "You're not." Their eyes locked, and for the first time, Hermione saw the shadow of the boy he could have been, if he hadn't been born into darkness. If the world hadn't demanded his loyalty to evil before he was even old enough to understand what that meant. She reached for his hand again. He didn't resist. They sat in silence, tethered together by grief and fear and something far more dangerous, understanding. But in the corner of the room, something stirred. Neither of them noticed the faint glint of magic, like a shimmer in the air. A surveillance spell. Watching. Listening. Reporting. The cracks in their worlds were widening. And someone was beginning to take notice. The next day, Hermione couldn't concentrate. Her quill trembled in her grip as she tried to copy notes in Transfiguration, but her mind replayed Draco's words over and over again. They gave me a task. They'll kill her. I carry their mark now. Every instinct in her screamed to go to Dumbledore, to tell someone, anyone, what she knew. But Draco's face haunted her, that raw desperation in his voice. He was on the edge of collapse, and if she broke his trust now, he'd disappear completely. Or worse, choose the very darkness he was trying to escape. She waited until nightfall before returning to the library. But Draco wasn't there. She waited an hour. 2. The candle beside her burned low, wax dripping steadily as her nerves unraveled. She told herself he was just avoiding attention, being careful, but the ache in her chest told another story. Finally, when the silence became unbearable, she whispered a point me spell, muttering his name under her breath. The wand quivered, tugging in a direction she hadn't expected. Not toward the Slytherin dungeons. Toward the astronomy tower. Her stomach dropped. Hermione moved quickly, the cold stone corridors swallowing her footsteps. The castle was still, a hushed breath before something inevitable. She climbed the spiral stairs 2 at a time, wand clutched tightly in her palm. When she reached the top, she paused just behind the final archway. Voices. 2. One was Draco's. The other made her blood freeze. Severus Snape. Isn't ready, Draco was saying. I need more time. You were given your instructions, Snape replied calmly. Delays breed suspicion. I can't do it, Draco's voice cracked. I'm not like him. I never was. There was a pause. Snape's voice dropped lower. And yet you took the mark. The time for indecision has passed. Hermione felt her breath catch. She pressed closer, just enough to glimpse Draco's silhouette framed by the tower's opening. His shoulders were tight, his back straight, but he was trembling. Snape stood opposite, black robes billowing in the cold wind like wings of shadow. I never wanted this, Draco said bitterly. They're watching me. Every second. I think someone's been tailing me inside the castle. You're being surveilled, Snape confirmed. Someone placed a scrying charm in the library. Your little meetings have not gone unnoticed. Hermione's blood turned to ice. She backed away before they could sense her, retreating down the tower steps with her heart thundering in her chest. Someone knew. Someone had been watching them, her and Draco. Her first thought was to run to McGonagall, but she stopped herself. What if the spy was within the Order? What if it wasn't just a Death Eater? Back in the library later that night, Draco finally came. His face was pale, his eyes hollow. He didn't speak at first, just sat down across from her, eyes unfocused. I know about the scrying charm, she said quietly. He didn't react. So do I. We're being hunted, Draco. I've always been hunted, Granger, he muttered. But now you are too. She swallowed hard. What happens now? He didn't answer. Instead, he pulled a small, leather-bound notebook from his robes and pushed it toward her. What's this? Everything I've been told to do. Dates. Names. Instructions. I wrote it down, in case I couldn't go through with it. Hermione's hands trembled as she opened the pages. Dark magic symbols. References to cursed objects. And one name that stood out like a burn on paper. Dumbledore. Her eyes shot up to his. They want you to kill him. Draco didn't flinch. They think it will be poetic. The boy they consider weak, bringing down the strongest wizard alive. And you were going to do it? I was going to try. For my mother. Tears threatened to rise, but Hermione blinked them back. You won't. I won't let you. I don't have a choice. You do. We do. He looked at her then, really looked at her, and something flickered behind his tired eyes. Hope maybe. Or terror. Hermione stood, pushing the notebook back toward him. We need to be careful. No more library meetings. No more being seen together. You're scared. Of course I'm scared. But I'm not leaving you. Draco rose slowly, his fingers brushing hers for just a second. They'll come after you, Hermione. If they find out how close we've grown. Let them, she said softly. I'm not afraid of them. You should be. She hesitated. Are you afraid of me? A pause. Then, no. I'm afraid for you. For the first time, he leaned in, not to mock her or whisper threats, but to press his forehead gently to hers. They stood like that, suspended in something neither of them could name. Then they parted, no goodbye, no promises, just a shared silence that said everything. But far beneath the castle, deep within shadows, the information was already moving. The spy knew, and they were about to make their first move. The next morning, Hogwarts woke to tension as thick as fog. No alarms, no announcements, just a chill that clung to every corridor, a hush that settled over the Great Hall. Even the ghosts seemed quieter. Students noticed professors whispering in corners, heads tilted, eyes watchful. Something had shifted. Hermione sat in the Great Hall, poking at her porridge. Ron and Harry chatted beside her about Quidditch tactics for their next match, but she barely heard them. Her thoughts were tangled around Draco, what he'd told her, what they'd risked by meeting again, and most of all, the knowledge that someone was watching. Her hands tightened around her spoon as the sound of flapping wings filled the hall. Dozens of owls swooped in for the morning post. Among them, a single black-feathered bird glided lower than the rest, silent and quick. It dropped a tightly rolled note in front of her, then veered sharply and vanished back out through the windows. Hermione stared at the parchment. No name. No seal. Only her. Ron leaned over. "What's that?" She tucked the note into her robes before he could read it. "Nothing. Just class stuff." He gave her a look, but she was already rising from the bench. "I need to go to the library." Harry frowned. "Before breakfast?" But she was already gone. Once alone in a quiet corridor, Hermione pulled the note open. "You were seen. The Dark Lord knows. Leave him, or you will be marked next. A friend." Her blood ran cold. No signature. No proof. But she knew. This wasn't an empty threat. This was a warning. She moved fast, ignoring the tight panic squeezing her chest. Her first instinct was to find Draco, to show him the note, but that would be reckless. Instead, she changed direction and ducked into an abandoned charms classroom, locking the door behind her. Her wand trembled in her grip as she whispered a spell to scan for listening charms. None. At least not yet. She burned the note with a silent incendio. The ashes fell into her palm like snow. The rest of the day passed in a blur. She saw Draco only once, across the courtyard during break. His face was unreadable, but his eyes locked onto hers for a brief second. Just long enough for her to shake her head once, slowly. "Don't come near me." He nodded, and turned away. They kept their distance, but fear clung to Hermione like smoke. Every time someone looked at her too long, Snape, Pansy, even Flitwick, her pulse skipped. Were they the spy? Were they waiting to see if she'd make another mistake? By the time evening fell, she had made her decision. She went to the room of requirement. The corridor was quiet, but she paced 3 times, thinking, a place where no one can see us. A place that's safe. The door formed and she slipped inside. To her surprise, Draco was already there. The room had become a sort of hidden study, bookshelves, a fireplace, 2 chairs. It remembered them. He stood by the fire, holding a small box in his hand. His expression was tight. "I knew you'd come. I got a note." His eyes sharpened. "So did I." Hermione pulled in a shaky breath. "It said the Dark Lord knows. That I'll be marked next if I don't walk away." Draco's jaw clenched. "Mine said if I speak to you again, they'll kill her. Not just threaten this time. Kill." They stood in silence. Then Hermione said softly, "We've waited too long. This, whatever it is between us, it's no longer a secret. They're watching us both. I know. We have to end it." Draco looked at her like she'd slapped him. But she wasn't crying. She wasn't pleading. She was steady. She was doing what he couldn't. "I can't protect you," he said quietly. "You were never meant to," she replied. "We were both foolish to think we could keep each other safe." "But he stopped himself. She crossed to him, heart shattering with every step, and took his hand. "I care about you," she said. "But this is bigger than us." He swallowed hard. "You were the only good thing left. And you were the only part of the darkness I didn't hate." She leaned up and kissed him, soft, brief, trembling with finality. Then she stepped back. "We don't talk again. Not in the halls, not in secret. We pretend this never happened." Draco stared at the fire. "And what if I can't?" "You can," she said. "You have to." She turned and left before she broke. Behind her, Draco stood in the flickering light, his hand still holding the small box. Inside it, hidden beneath layers of cloth, lay a single vial of silvery memory. Their first night in the library. A memory he couldn't bear to lose. But outside, the storm was gathering, and someone had already begun setting their trap. The days that followed were a test in silence. Hermione moved through the castle like a shadow, never looking toward Draco, never letting her gaze linger too long. She knew better now. She understood the stakes. And so did he. But beneath her quiet exterior, her mind was in overdrive. Someone had sent that note. Someone inside the school, likely close to them both. And they hadn't just warned her, they'd warned Draco. Which meant whoever it was wanted this relationship, if it could even be called that, destroyed without direct interference. Manipulation from the shadows. Classic Death Eater behavior. She began watching more closely. Not just Snape, though he remained high on her list. No others. Pansy Parkinson, whose eyes always followed Draco's movements. Theodore Nott, who had a habit of appearing wherever she was. And Blaise Zabini, always too quiet, always just far enough from the action to be dangerous. The threat wasn't just to her now, it was to Hogwarts itself. In the Gryffindor common room one evening, Harry slammed shut his potions textbook and groaned. "I swear Snape's trying to kill us with this essay." Hermione gave a weak smile. "It's nothing you can't handle." Ron stretched. "You okay, Hermione? You've been acting weird lately. Jumpier than usual." "I'm fine," she said quickly. Too quickly. Harry and Ron exchanged glances. She stood up. "I'm just going to the library before it closes." "You always are," Ron muttered. But she didn't go to the library. She took a long, winding route through the castle and ended up in the defense against the dark arts classroom. It was empty. Cold. The torches flickered faintly, casting long shadows on the stone walls. She sat at the front desk, lit her wand, and pulled out Draco's notebook, the one filled with orders, lists, spells. She'd copied it the night he gave it to her, just in case. Tonight, she noticed something she hadn't before. One of the names listed next to a scheduled exchange at the astronomy tower had been hastily scratched out and replaced. She used a simple reversal charm, and the original name glowed faintly. Theodore Nott. She froze. The name had been swapped for Avery, a known Death Eater, but it was clear someone didn't want Theo's involvement recorded. A mistake. A sloppy one. She rose immediately, stuffing everything into her bag. If Nott was a direct agent, he was the weak link. And she needed proof. She moved quickly, ducking into hidden corridors and using passageways Fred and George had shown her years ago. She headed for the Slytherin common room. Not to go inside, but to wait. And watch. By midnight, the hallway was silent. Then footsteps. Nott emerged alone, glancing over his shoulder. Hermione cast a quick disillusionment charm and followed at a distance. He walked with purpose, heading down toward the dungeons, past the potions classroom, past the kitchens, toward the lower levels where no students had any reason to go. He reached a dead-end wall and whispered something she couldn't hear. The bricks shifted, forming a narrow archway. Hermione slipped in before it closed behind him. What she saw made her stomach twist. It was a chamber, small, circular, carved from ancient stone, lit only by green-tinged flames that flickered with unnatural life. On the floor was a drawn circle etched with blood. On the wall, a tapestry of the dark mark hovered magically, pulsing faintly. And in the center of the room stood Theodore Nott, whispering into a charmed mirror. She crept closer, silencing every step. The mirror shimmered with a face, blurred by magic, but unmistakably male. Hooded. Watching. "She's getting too close," Theo was saying. "I tried to scare her off." The voice on the mirror responded. "Then scare her more." Theo shifted. "She's smart. Smarter than most of them. If she keeps poking around, she dies. Do you need permission?" Theo flinched. "No. I understand." The mirror went dark. Hermione nearly stumbled in her retreat, her blood roaring in her ears. Theo Nott. The spy. The one who'd threatened her and Draco. He was going to kill her. And she had no idea how much time she had left. She didn't sleep that night. The next day, she returned to the room of requirement and found it already open. Inside, Draco sat on the floor, looking at something small in his hand. He didn't look up when she entered. "I told myself I wouldn't see you again." She closed the door behind her. "I know who the spy is." That got his attention. He rose slowly. "Who?" "Theodore Nott. He's been in contact with someone. Maybe even Voldemort himself. He's the one who changed the names in your notebook. Draco's eyes narrowed. How do you know that? I followed him. I watched him speak into a cursed mirror. He said I'd die if I kept poking around. Draco's face darkened. Then he's already decided. I know. They stared at each other. Hermione stepped closer. We have to move first. If they're planning to act, we need to act faster. You're talking about killing him. I'm talking about exposing him. Draco's expression was unreadable. If we fail, there's no coming back. There never was, she said. For the first time in days, his hand found hers. The firelight flickered. They weren't lovers anymore. Not friends. Not allies. They were survivors, bonded by war and secrecy, trapped between choices that could only end in blood. And in the darkness just outside the room of requirement, someone listened. And smiled. Hermione barely slept. Her nerves were frayed. Her mind locked on every word she'd heard in that hidden chamber. Theodore Knott wasn't just a spy. He was plotting her murder. The knowledge weighed on her chest like a stone. She met Draco again the next night. Neither of them spoke much, just shared updates like soldiers at war. I checked his trunk, Draco muttered. He's got dark artifacts stashed beneath a false bottom. Cursed daggers. Books banned even in Nocturne Alley. Hermione swallowed. If we go to a professor, no one will believe us. Not with your blood status and my family name. He wasn't wrong. If they accused Theo without iron-proof evidence, it would blow back on them. And if Theo got wind of it, they'd be dead before sunrise. So, we find proof, Hermione whispered. And then we act. It began like a slow hunt. Watching Theodore from the shadows, mapping his patterns, cataloging his secrets. Hermione used a charm that tracked magical residue left on his robes. It pointed toward the same cursed mirror chamber every time he vanished for long stretches. Draco managed to accidentally swap Knott's quill with a charmed one that recorded spoken phrases. Most were nothing but casual Slytherin chatter. But then, on the fourth day, Draco slipped into the room of requirement with eyes wide and breath tight. He tossed her the charmed quill. Play the last sentence. Hermione tapped it with her wand. A moment of static, then Theo's voice, clear as glass. She'll be alone in the astronomy tower after curfew. Make sure it looks like an accident. Hermione went cold. That's tonight. Draco nodded. We don't have time to get help. Hermione's hands trembled. Then we set the trap. The astronomy tower was quiet at night, haunted by stars and the scent of cold stone. Hermione climbed the spiral staircase after curfew, her footsteps deliberately loud. She didn't sneak. She wanted to be seen. She stood near the edge, pretending to read from a scroll. Waiting. Down below, hidden beneath an invisibility cloak, Draco waited, wand clenched, body tense. He hated this plan, hated using her as bait. But she insisted. And he'd be there the second Theo made his move. The minutes stretched. Then came the creak of stairs. A soft footstep. Then another. Hermione's heart thundered. Theo appeared at the top of the stairs, hood up, wand drawn, moving like a shadow. His eyes flicked to Hermione, and narrowed in surprise. You're braver than I thought, he said quietly. Hermione turned slowly. You're dumber than I thought. He raised his wand. Draco moved. He cast Petrificus Totalis from the shadows, and Theo hit the ground with a sickening thud, frozen, eyes wide. Hermione stepped forward, heart racing. You idiot. You actually came. Draco pulled the invisibility cloak off and looked down at Theo with disgust. He was going to push you. Hermione didn't answer. She just cast a binding charm around Theo's body and levitated him off the ground. We take him to McGonagall, she said. Now. But just as they turned, a voice echoed from the shadows. I wouldn't do that if I were you. They froze. From the stairs behind them, Professor Snape emerged, black robes billowing, eyes like polished coal. Draco's breath hitched. You were watching? I've been watching both of you for weeks, Snape said coldly. And now you've finally gone too far. Hermione's wand lifted. He tried to kill me. We have proof. Oh, I don't doubt that, Snape said. But proof doesn't matter to the Dark Lord. The room went silent. What are you saying? Draco asked quietly. Snape looked at Theo's frozen form with disdain. I'm saying you forced my hand. Both of you. He raised his wand. Hermione reacted first, blasting a protective shield between them. Snape's curse hit the shield and ricocheted, shattering a section of the tower wall. Stones rained down. The tower shook. "Run!" Hermione shouted. They bolted down the spiral staircase, dragging Theo's body with them. Spells exploded around them as Snape pursued, relentless, furious, faster than either of them could anticipate. They reached the bottom floor and ducked into a side corridor just before a spell scorched the wall above their heads. Hermione's heart pounded like a drum. "We need to split up," Draco gasped. "No, you get Theo to the headmistress," he insisted. "I'll lead Snape away." "Draco." He kissed her, quick and desperate. Then he turned and ran, wand flashing behind him. Hermione hesitated for a heartbeat that felt like forever. Then she gritted her teeth, clutched the levitating Theo tighter, and raced toward McGonagall's office. Blood roared in her ears. Behind her, she heard another explosion. She didn't look back. The trap had been set, but she didn't know who had truly walked into it. The castle felt like it was breathing, alive, groaning under the pressure of secrets and betrayal. Every corridor Hermione raced through seemed to lean inward, closing in. Her wand light shook as she dragged the bound and frozen form of Theodore not behind her, Theo's body bumping awkwardly on the stairs as she pushed forward, refusing to slow down. Behind her, the sounds of spells and crashing stone echoed in the distance. Draco was still fighting. Or running. Or maybe. No. She refused to think about it. She skidded to a stop in front of the stone gargoyle, guarding the entrance to the headmistress's office. "Veritas Bellum," she shouted. The gargoyle leapt aside. She sprinted up the stairs and burst through the door, nearly colliding with Professor McGonagall, who was mid-conversation with Kingsley Shacklebolt via Enchanted Mirror. "Hermione?" McGonagall's eyes widened. "What on earth?" Hermione waved her wand and dropped Theodore's frozen body on the floor with a thud. "He's working for Voldemort. We have proof. He tried to kill me." Kingsley's face in the mirror sharpened. "Start from the beginning." She did, barely stopping to breathe. She told them everything. About the cursed mirror, about the altered notes, about Theo's plan to murder her, and the confrontation in the astronomy tower. About Snape, his appearance, his fury, his threat. McGonagall's mouth set in a tight line. "You're saying Professor Snape was aiding Theodore, not?" "No," Hermione said grimly. "I'm saying Snape was going to kill us for exposing Theo. He's still loyal to the Dark Lord." Kingsley gave a long, slow breath. "Minerva, you must act immediately. Detain Snape. Quietly if possible. We don't know who else may be involved." "We can't risk confronting him outright," McGonagall muttered. "He's too dangerous." Hermione interrupted, her voice trembling. "Draco is still out there. He split off to distract Snape. I don't know if he's safe." The room went silent. McGonagall's face softened just a little. "We'll find him, Miss Granger. I promise." But they didn't find him. By sunrise, a full security sweep of Hogwarts had taken place. Professors Flitwick, Sprout, and even Hagrid had joined the search. Aurors were called. Theo was taken under custody, magically sedated and transported under tight guard. Snape, however, had vanished. His quarters were empty. His private stores cleared out. Even his signature potions were gone, not a drop remaining. Hermione waited in McGonagall's office until noon, fingers curled tightly in her lap, her eyes locked on the door. Then the knock came. It was Harry. He looked pale and out of breath. "We found something." The chamber was tucked behind the second-floor girls' lavatory, ironically, near Moaning Myrtle's haunt. A place no one would bother to search. Inside, they found signs of struggle. Scorch marks, broken furniture, and blood, small streaks smeared across the floor. But no body. No Draco. Hermione stared at the blood like it was a stain in her soul. He was here. Harry placed a hand on her shoulder. "There's more." He led her to the corner where a single item had been left behind. Draco's wand, snapped cleanly in two. Hermione collapsed to her knees. She didn't cry. She couldn't. Harry crouched beside her. He might still be alive. "Snape doesn't leave survivors," she whispered. But even she wasn't sure if she believed that anymore. Snape's behavior had shifted over the years, always walking a fine line between protector and traitor. Maybe there was something else here. Something deeper. Maybe Draco was a bargaining chip. Or a hostage? Or worse? By evening, the school was in a state of panic. Rumors flew faster than broomsticks. That a Death Eater had infiltrated the castle. That students were under threat. That Snape had kidnapped a Slytherin and murdered him in cold blood. McGonagall held a hastily arranged school-wide assembly to reassure the students. Hermione didn't go. She sat in the room of requirement alone. It had reshaped itself to mirror their favorite version. A quiet study with tall bookshelves, a fireplace, and a window showing an illusion of the stars. She sat curled in an armchair, staring at the flames, Draco's name echoing in her chest like a heartbeat. He was gone. The room gave no answers. No comfort. Just silence. Until a sound. The soft scratch of parchment. She looked up sharply. A single folded note had appeared on the table before her. She reached for it, fingers trembling. It read, "Not dead. Not safe. Don't trust anyone. Burn this." No signature. No initials. But she knew the handwriting. Draco was alive. Hermione stared at the note, her heart leaping, and then sinking all over again. He was alive, but in hiding. Or imprisoned. Or worse. But now she knew the game was far from over. And she wasn't going to sit and wait anymore. If Snape had taken Draco, she'd tear Hogwarts apart to get him back. Even if it meant becoming someone she no longer recognized. Even if it meant crossing lines she once swore never to touch. The fire roared louder. And in the shadows, something watched her. And waited. Hermione burned the note in the fireplace, the flames curling hungrily around the edges of the parchment. The last word, anyone, disappeared in the crackling heat, leaving only ash and the echo of fear. She stared into the fire long after it was gone. Draco was alive, but he was in danger. And she had no idea who to trust. Not McGonagall, not the Ministry, not even Harry. If Draco believed she couldn't rely on anyone, then the rot went deeper than she'd ever imagined. She'd fought dark wizards, survived war, and walked through fire. But this wasn't war. This was deception soaked in silence. And if she wanted to save Draco, she'd have to abandon the rules. She pulled her wand from her sleeve and whispered, "Alohomora." The room of requirement shifted. Bookshelves rolled away. The walls curved into something darker, colder. The air turned heavy. And in the center of the new room stood a small, sealed cabinet. A Horcrux detector. She'd built it with Harry during 7th year, before the final battle. It could trace cursed magic. But she hadn't used it in years. She reached toward it. "Trace dark magic," she whispered. "Recent. Linked to Severus Snape." The detector pulsed once, then opened with a soft click. A single glowing thread of light emerged, winding like a snake through the air. Hermione followed it, every step a growing certainty that she was leaving behind who she used to be. The thread led her deep into the forbidden forest. She went alone. No wand light. No cloak. Just instinct and fury. The thread dimmed near a cluster of stones. Stones she recognized. They marked the edge of a forgotten network of tunnels, once used by smugglers during Grindelwald's rise. The entrance was hidden beneath a half-rotted tree, its bark etched with faded protection runes. She touched her wand to the rune. It flared, and then the ground shifted, revealing stairs into darkness. Hermione stepped inside. The tunnel stank of mold and magic. She lit her wand only briefly, enough to see the stone walls and the occasional rat scurrying past. The deeper she went, the colder it became. Then she heard it. A faint voice. Low. Controlled. "You don't understand what she's becoming. She'll destroy everything." Draco. Her heart jumped. She pressed her back to the wall and edged forward slowly, listening. Another voice replied. "This one's smooth. Icy. She's already crossed the threshold, Draco. She chose to trap Theodore. She chose to challenge me. And now she's here." Hermione turned the corner, wand at the ready. Snape stood at the far end of the chamber, his cloak swirling like smoke. Draco was slumped against a wall, blood on his temple, arms bound with magical chains that sparked with faint red lightning. Snape didn't look surprised to see her. "I expected you sooner," he said. Hermione stepped into the room, wand steady. "Let him go." Snape raised a brow. "And if I don't, I'll make you." Snape smirked. "Will you now? What curse will you use, Miss Granger? Another stunning spell? Or something more permanent?" Hermione's wand shook slightly. Draco's voice was hoarse. Hermione, don't. But she didn't lower her wand. She took a step forward. You're helping Voldemort. You're torturing students. Why? Why betray everything you stood for? Snape's expression flickered, just for a moment. I never betrayed what I stood for, he said quietly. You and Potter, you never understood. The war didn't end. It only paused. The Ministry is compromised. Hogwarts is crawling with lies. I tried to prepare Draco to survive it. You chained him to a wall, Hermione snapped. Snape turned to Draco. Tell her then. Tell her what I offered. Draco looked up slowly, eyes full of shame. He said we could join him, Draco said. He said if we worked together, we could protect each other. That the order is broken. That McGonagall's being watched. Hermione stared. And you believed him? No, Draco whispered. But I didn't have a choice. Not after he found out about us. Snape's voice was low. I could have killed him. Or worse. But I didn't. I kept him alive because I knew you would come. And you were always the one worth watching. Hermione raised her wand. Let him go. Now. Snape moved like lightning. His spell shattered her shield and threw her back against the wall. She barely had time to dodge the second curse, Crucio, and the pain singed her shoulder as she rolled across the floor. You're strong, Hermione, Snape snarled. But strength isn't enough anymore. You need clarity. You think love is going to save him? That your feelings matter in a war of shadows. She didn't answer with words. She cast Sectum Sempra. Snape deflected it, but not completely. A shallow gash opened along his side. He staggered but didn't fall. You've learned well, he breathed. I'm not your student, she said. Not anymore. In the corner, Draco surged forward, wrenching against his bonds. Snape turned his wand toward him. Hermione didn't think. She just acted. Avada Kedavra. The green light exploded from her wand. Snape's eyes widened, not in fear, but in recognition. The curse struck him in the chest. He collapsed. Silence fell like a hammer. Hermione stood there, chest heaving, her wand still raised. Her lips trembled. Her knees felt like glass. Draco was silent. She ran to him, broke the chains with a counter curse, and pulled him into her arms. He didn't say anything. He didn't have to. She had crossed the line. And there was no going back. The air in the tunnel felt heavy, like something had broken, and the pieces were slowly sinking into the ground, too deep to ever retrieve. The silence hung around Hermione like a fog, thick and suffocating. She held Draco tightly, her arms trembling as his chest heaved beneath her hands, the sharp rasp of his breath the only sound in the aftermath of the curse. She had killed Severus Snape. The words felt like acid in her throat, burning as they slid through her mind. Draco pulled away from her, his expression unreadable, though his eyes were wide. You killed him. Hermione swallowed hard, trying to find her voice. The words seemed stuck, heavy with the weight of what she had just done. He was going to kill you. He was going to. I know, Draco interrupted, his voice barely a whisper. He rubbed his face with the back of his hand, as though trying to wipe away the horror of the moment. But now he's dead, Hermione. And you're not just going to walk away from that. Her heart stuttered painfully in her chest. You think I don't know that? She said, her voice trembling. You think I don't know what I've done? She reached for his arm, her fingers brushing against his skin, desperate to hold on to something. Anything that wasn't the darkness she had just unleashed. But he was going to hurt you, Draco. Worse than he already has. Draco's gaze softened, but the wariness never fully left his eyes. You don't understand. It's not just him we have to worry about. It's what happens now. You think we can just walk out of here, and everything will go back to normal. Her heart sank. What do you mean? Draco's voice dropped lower, his words thick with the weight of something unsaid. I mean, Snape wasn't just a teacher, Hermione. He was a key. A gateway. To the Dark Lord. To the people who still want us dead. If we kill him, if we kill someone like him, they'll come for us. Hermione felt the floor beneath her shift, as though the ground was crumbling beneath her feet. She hadn't thought about it like that. She hadn't considered the full repercussions of her actions, the truth of what Snape had been, his connections, his loyalties. And now, because of her, the full wrath of Voldemort's followers would fall on them. Draco was right. There was no going back. But as much as it terrified her, a small part of her didn't care. She had crossed a line she couldn't uncross. She had killed someone to protect him, to protect Draco, and she would do it again. "I won't let them take you," she whispered, her fingers tightening around his arm. Draco's eyes flickered, an emotion, relief? Fear? Passing through them before he masked it with a hard expression. "Then you need to understand something. This isn't about us anymore, Hermione. It's about survival." She nodded slowly, her chest heavy with the weight of the unspoken truth that was beginning to dawn on her. "We'll do whatever it takes," she whispered. The words hung between them, like a pact forged in desperation. She had crossed a threshold, and now there was no going back. No safe haven. No shield. Only darkness. The next few days were a blur. McGonagall, Kingsley, and the rest of the staff had been alerted about Snape's death. The official story was that he had died during a violent confrontation with a rogue Death Eater, an unfortunate casualty of the ongoing war. But the whispers that had begun to spread around Hogwarts told a different tale, one much darker. Hermione had seen the looks exchanged between professors, McGonagall's stern gaze, Sprout's tightly pursed lips. They were worried, but not just for Snape's death. They were worried about them, about what it meant that Hermione Granger, the once pure-hearted Gryffindor, had crossed the ultimate line. She couldn't escape the shadows of their stares. They followed her everywhere, across the stone floors of Hogwarts, down the echoing corridors, and into every classroom. They whispered behind her back. They were watching, and somewhere in that heavy silence, she could feel the pull of her own darkness deepening. Draco had stayed close, more out of necessity than anything else. She saw him as a ghost, his face a mask of frustration and fear, always a step ahead, always looking over his shoulder. He didn't trust anyone anymore, not even her, not fully. But he needed her, and she needed him. Together, they began to prepare. For what? For war. For survival. But as the days passed, Hermione began to notice something else. Something darker. Something she couldn't ignore. Draco wasn't just worried about surviving. He wasn't just afraid of the Dark Lord's followers coming after them. He was changing. Slowly. Imperceptibly. But he was changing. She saw it in the way he spoke to her, the sharp edge in his voice when he looked at her. She felt it in the coldness of his touch when he brushed against her arm, the way his eyes would flicker with something darker whenever they were alone. She didn't want to admit it, but she could see it now. Draco had embraced the darkness, and it was starting to consume him. And maybe, just maybe, it was consuming her too. She stood in front of the window in her room late one night, staring out at the moonlit grounds of Hogwarts, her fingers pressing against the cool glass. The world outside was peaceful, quiet, but inside, in the hollow place where her soul used to be, there was only darkness. And she had no idea how far it would go, but she was ready to follow it to the end. She just didn't know if Draco was. And that terrified her more than anything else.